Hey, welcome back to Mocktails with Marina. I'm your host, Marina, and today we're here with Trixie and Michael of Astrobrew and Astrobliss, and we're going to talk about operating and competing in the non-alc space. But spoiler alert, we don't necessarily believe there's such thing as competition. We're here to talk about it and all the fun things that come with it. So, all that being said, let's go ahead and dive right in. Thank you so much for being here today, Trixie and Michael.
Thank you so much for having
Yeah,
us.
thank you.
Yay! Yeah, I'm so excited to dive right in because y'all have a great product and you have a lot of really fun things going on. So, let's get right to it. What is the backstory behind Astro Brew and Astro Bliss?
Yeah, no, definitely. So yeah, we started our company in 2020. Trixie and I were both pretty fresh out of college. Trixie had started working at an advertising agency, and I actually graduated at the end of 2020 and was looking at getting an engineering job. And obviously, job market didn't look great. There were some opportunities for me, but nothing I got really excited about. And so about 6 months earlier, I had started wholesaling CBD. I was doing white label for small businesses, so like a lot of kava bars and health stores and that kind of places that wanted their own brand of CBD, so their customers who were already loyal to their brand could support them even more. And I'd kind of like stumbled my way into that. A friend of mine, his family had a farm in Colorado that was selling CBD, and I saw that there was kind of this gap in like fulfillment. I mean, obviously shipping and everything was slow in 2020. So I ended up like making a big wholesale order and setting up a warehouse and starting distributing stuff in 2020. And then after I graduated, Trixie kind of pushed me towards like, hey, why don't you do this as a full-time thing? There's definitely some potential here. And at that time, the hemp market was really around full spectrum CBD. There was very little of the Delta 8 or any THC products that were out. So yeah, that's business was picking up. We decided to do it full time. So our company's name is Astrobleme. Trixie and I were sitting around one night, and I needed to file my LLC, and we didn't have a company name at all. It was just, hey, we're selling this, but we have a good product. That was the focus. So we kind of were going back and forth, and we had these like arbitrary rules in our head. I was like, I want it to be one word, and I wanted to start with an A because it's just top of mind for people. But yeah, we didn't really have any solid ideas. So we asked our Google Home, like our Google TV. I just said, "What's your favorite word?" And it said Astrobleme. It's a word with impact. And right away, that kind of like stuck with us. I looked it up. Astrobleme.com was available. And the definition of Astrobleme is like an impact crater or star wound, from like the root of the word. So it kind of felt like we were trying to make these impactful products and do that kind of thing. So it definitely fit. So we filed the LLC, and that was really the start of it all. It was really good timing because early 2021 was really when Delta 8 started to kind of come onto the scene. There were a few different like big companies doing stuff with it, but I had built a relationship with a manufacturer, and I remember the first time they sent me a sample of Delta 8. Like many people in my head, I was like, oh well, this is, if it's legal, it's not going to be much of anything. And so I remember I was going to a meeting with someone to discuss something else completely outside of my business, and I was like, oh well, I'll try this Delta 8 gummy and see how I feel, expecting it to be kind of like a CBD effect. And I took a 25 milligram Delta 8 gummy, and if you've had one, it was not like CBD. It was a very strong, body heavy kind of high, and that's when I was like, wow, this is legal, and it's what people have kind of been looking for in CBD. So it was really good timing. Then we kind of got into doing white label Delta 8 for a couple different of our current CBD customers, and then it kind of built from there. Later that year, in about June of 2021, was when we decided to have our own brand. We had these high quality products that we had sourced, and we were doing white label for people. But when like family and friends that knew what we were doing, they wanted to buy our product, we ended up sending them to like white label customers, and that didn't always make sense for them. A lot of them didn't have it for sale online, so we decided to kind of build our own brand out. We worked with Trixie's cousins. Actually, they did our initial branding with us, and they helped us develop like the Astrobliss brand, and that was really when we started to get like in front of consumers and have a more consumer facing mindset. At that same time, we were still doing mostly wholesale. So I opened like a small office here in Tampa, just around the corner from our house, and it wasn't like open to consumers. We were doing online orders, and then we were doing wholesale, and it was probably still about 80% wholesale. And as that was kind of building up and ramping up, the corner unit in the building where our office was came up for lease, and it had been a pharmacy previously. And we had kind of played around with the idea of like opening a store, but we didn't want to just be a CBD store. I had never, before I started doing what I was doing, gone and sought out a CBD store. And I thought that a lot of consumers wouldn't necessarily be going into that kind of place just on their own. And a lot of our white label customers were kava bars. So we saw that there was this like entire market that was already existed. People were hanging out in these spaces, and that's where they were buying a lot of the CBD products because they trusted the products from that place that they were hanging out. And we also noticed that there's still a whole section of people that wouldn't go into your average kava bar just because the ambiance could be a little off-putting for some people. And it definitely is, it could be kind of alienating for some people. So we wanted to kind of find a middle ground there where on the surface it looked like a coffee shop, but we had all the kava and kratom products and mocktails and that kind of thing. And then obviously also pushed our CBD and THC products. So in November of 2021, we moved into that space, and we started doing the build out and everything. And we actually were fortunate enough to open in January of 2022, which, having known now a lot of people who have opened kava bars and dealt with commercial leases and that kind of stuff, 3 months was a pretty impressive turnaround.
So impressive, by the way. Wow.
We definitely, and I mean, we did have some issues after that with permitting, and we didn't do everything correctly, but we kind of just, it was like open or we're never going to open. So we got open, and that's Astrobrew. That's the name of the store. And our focus was really just on like really high quality coffee and tea. And then we had a kombucha company that's local to Tampa that we partnered with, and our hemp products. So it was coffee, tea, kava, and hemp were really our big pieces there. We were one of the first accounts for Micheal 9 in Tampa. I had been speaking with them because at the time they were considering doing CBD products, and the beverage industry was definitely like just starting to take off there on the CBD and THC world. So we opened with Micheal 9, and we were actually serving their tea at the time. And then over time, we've kind of changed that. We brew all our own kava and kratom in-house now. We have a whole menu of mocktails. We have kombucha. We have functional mushroom drinks on our menu. We've kind of built that all out over time. And then it was around April of 2022 that we came out with like the first iteration of our lemonade. Obviously, the Delta 8 products kind of came out far before any of the Delta 9 products did, and that has to do with the legal understanding of Delta 9 and the Farm Bill and how it was written. So it kind of took the marketplace a while to interpret the law as it's written. So we were even hesitant when we first started selling our Delta 9 products, whether they were compliant or not. But we had lawyers look over that, and that definitely kind of cleared that up. And now the market has mostly moved away from Delta 8. But yeah, so that's when we launched the first iteration of our lemonades, and then that kind of took off, and that has become a I would say the majority of our business is our Astrobliss lemonades now. We still sell a lot of gummies, and we still do a lot of volume out of our store with, different beverages and stuff. We have customers that come in that couldn't care less about THC and they just come in for coffee, or we have customers that, just want the functional mushroom drinks. But the THC beverages have definitely become like the cornerstone of our business.
Wow, this is the coolest story ever to me because 2020 was not that long ago, and you have so many cool iterations helping both businesses and your direct consumers get what they need. Um, I bet it was so exciting for you a couple weeks ago when the all the news hit that cannabis has officially surpassed alcohol. Super cool. And with that being said, I feel like there's a lot of there's still some gaps of information, right? So for example, look, I've been smoking weed since I was a high schooler, like even before that, right? It's one of those things where if you grew up with cannabis pre legalization, pre what it is now, there some of these you know, some of these drinks, some of these compounds can be a little bit confusing. So for example, I remember I was at a convention here in Vegas, and it was a wholesaler convention, and and there were so many Delta 8, Delta 9 and CBD products, CBG, all the things everywhere, right? And my husband and I were really sensitive to a lot of things nowadays. And I mean, we at home, like the cannabis that we consume is like homegrown, right? So for us, when we're in the marketplace, we want to make sure we know, is there something crazy? And they're like, what is this going to do? So the first time we had tried a Delta 8, it made us feel so anxious and we were so confused because we were like, Lady Mary Jane, what have you done? Like, you've been our friend all these years. So do you mind explaining to everybody listening right now, what is the difference between Delta 8 and Delta 9? And also, like, what role does CBD play in the recipe of, that experience?
Yeah, definitely. I'll preface it with I'm not a scientist, and I definitely I have my understanding of it. I'm sure there's gonna be people that have disagreements and that kind of thing, but basically, if you look at like the cannabis plant, which hemp and cannabis are the same plant, it's just really a legal definition that keeps them different. CBD and THC are the most known, the most common cannabinoids, but there's over 100 cannabinoids in the cannabis plant um, that are all naturally occurring. And Delta 8 is an isomer of THC. So Delta 9 is the THC that's been THC since before anyone differentiated anything, right? Delta 9 is the THC that like your parents smoked in the 70s, that kind of thing. Um, it just wasn't called that because there was no need to differentiate it from the other isomers. Delta 8 initially gained a lot of popularity because of the way the Farm Bill was written, which the Farm Bill specifies that hemp is cannabis with less than 0.3% Delta 9 THC on a dry weight basis. So they had this definition where it's like, oh, this THC is the THC that gets you high and is illegal. And that was their initial understanding. The isomers like Delta 8 and Delta 10 don't occur at a high enough level naturally in cannabis to get you high. So the initial Delta 8 kind of rush was from converted Delta 8. So basically they take CBD distillate, they grow a bunch of hemp, they extract CBD out, and then they convert it using the Jensen acid process or like another chemical reaction that changes the molecule from CBD into Delta 8. And Delta 8 binds with your endocannabinoid system similarly to Delta 9 THC. Most people like say that it's closer to like 75% strength, or that it's not as strong, or it's more of an indica type high. That's all kind of just opinion based, I believe. I don't think there's a lot of like hard science, mainly because there's not a lot of research on it. But at the end of the day, Delta 8 got you high and it was legal. So that's the kind of why that became the really big part of the market. And I think a big issue with that was there wasn't a lot of clarity on how it was being produced. There wasn't, you know, there's some pretty harsh chemicals in there in that conversion, and it's not always they're not always remediated like they should be. So it wasn't cleaned up as much as it should be. And then the strength was also not regulated. So, you know, in Florida, we have a Department of Agriculture regulation over hemp, and you're required to have a certificate of analysis on all your products showing how much of each cannabinoid is in it. That's not always followed. So I found early on that a lot of the Delta 8 products, they'd say it has 25 milligrams. You'd eat a 25 milligram gummy and you wouldn't feel anything. And that's because it probably didn't have 25 milligrams of Delta 8 in it, probably had less, because at the time Delta 8 wasn't as cheap as it is now. Or a company went the other way and they said it had 25 milligrams, but it really had 50 or 100. And that was because in their mind, they were like, oh, well, if we make it stronger, the people are going to be like, wow, this is really good and a really good deal. We're going to want to come back. I didn't end up, like, I never ran any lab testing on products, but I just kind of saw that it was typically not as strong or a lot stronger than it was advertised. And that's where now we get a lot of people coming into the store, and they won't touch anything with the word Delta in it because they had a bad experience their first time with some Delta 8 gummy that they bought at a convenience store, or, you know, and they don't want to get involved in that. And that's where, so Delta 9, about a year, I would say later in 2021, early 2022 was when the legal interpretation of that 0.3% on a dry weight basis kind of evolved to people realizing that, well, if a product weighs 5 grams, it could have 15 milligrams of THC in it, of regular Delta 9 natural THC, and still be federally legal. So, and that's where I think companies started to realize, you know, they had lawyers that had written opinions on this, that you could basically sell traditional THC, and there is still some Delta 9 that's being converted, but a lot of it is just naturally occurring from a lot of hemp, like being extracted from a large amount of hemp. And you could sell these products that weren't converted, didn't have these chemical reactions used to make them, and were basically fully federally legal.
Wow, I'm so glad that you explained this in this detail, because there have been certain parts of the process that, you know, I had my inklings about as someone who used to work in those uh, nutritional chemistry labs doing the tests. But, you know, since I hadn't done it myself, I'd always wondered. So thank you so much for really diving deep into that. And I love that before, you know, when you were mentioning how some people, you know, who walks into a CBD store, right? I mean, I've worked in a few different locations where I've seen like a CBD store in the same strip mall as, you know, smoke shops, kava bars, coffee shops. But the people who typically go in there, I mean, you know, maybe this is different in different parts of the country, but at least in my experience in Arizona and in Nevada, in the general West, the people who tend to go into CBD stores, I usually see the snowbirds going in there trying to be like, what is this stuff? And like, how can it help me? So to be able to create this kind of this middle zone, it's not quite a CBD store, it's not quite a kava bar, it's not quite a coffee shop, but having this central place where you can come, I think that's really, really, I admire it so deeply, because something I'm always preaching is functional mixology. It doesn't matter what herb or what botanical you're selling, so long as you know what the purpose of it is, how you can educate people to, you know, enjoy it, and then, you know, serve it in a very responsible way. So I'm just super curious, when you guys were opening up the Astro Brew, like the shop itself, when you guys were like designing the space and the menu, you know, knowing that you're coming primarily from hemp, but trying to marry it with all of these other things, like how did you balance that in that initial process, especially since you opened in 3 months? I'm really curious, you know, what was it like for you to develop a menu with so many options?
Yeah, so it's interesting because our like Astro Brew has evolved so much over, like, we think we've officially been open for about like 2.5 years now. And When we originally opened, like we were determined to make it a space where like it was comfortable for like your grandma who knows nothing about like alternative beverages or anything like that to come in, and or like kids or something like that. We wanted to make a space where like everyone could like find something that they liked. And specifically with like the alternative beverages like kava and kratom and THC infused stuff, like we we didn't even really, I think, realize the audience that really was out there for it. And even the people who would come in who didn't know we had these alternative beverages, they would just come in for a cup of coffee. They would learn about THC, and they would learn about it like all of, not just THC, but all alternative beverages in a comfortable environment where they felt like they could like talk to someone who they could trust. So that was like, I think the original reason we wanted to open Astrobrew was just a place where you could come in and comfortably learn about all of these alternative products. But I will say, and I think Michael will agree with me, that when we first opened, we were kind of like bare bones. We didn't even really have a menu set up. It really evolved over this 2.5 years we've been in business. Now we have a full like tap list, a mocktail menu. We've got curated canned like THC drinks. We've got kratom drinks. So there's really something for everyone. But it's funny because we did not start out with like all of that in mind. It really kind of like over time we learned, oh, okay, like we saw what customers were coming in for, and we kind of met them where they were at, but also kind of also wanted to educate people around these products. Would you agree, Michael?
Yeah, and I mean, I think like we didn't have the knowledge or like the experience using like kava and kratom at the time that we do now. I mean, like I'm not a daily user of kava or kratom, but I mean, I would say like a few days a week I'll have a kratom tea or occasionally a kratom seltzer. But I think when we first opened, we were maybe a little
Naive.
naive to like think that, oh, we're going to open this and people will just come and they'll get what we have and they'll like it. And obviously as customers come in, you get a lot of very active like haptic feedback. We didn't have espresso for the longest time because we wanted to be like a kind of fast service, and we wanted to be able to train people to work for us and them not need to be full baristas. And now we just recently added an espresso machine, so that when people order that, it's available to them. But it was funny to see how there's definitely people who come in and they think they're so used to going to Starbucks that they want their Starbucks order. Like if I had $1 for every time I was asked for a Frappuccino, you just had to say, and we were really like nice about it. I would always just say, no, sorry, like we're not an espresso bar, we don't have that, but there's a local place down the street that you could go to, or there's a Starbucks over the other way, and kind of point them to that. And a lot of times I think they were surprised that we weren't like, oh no, get what we have. Like I would just be like, oh, if that's what you're looking for, here's a good place to go for it. And I think, yeah, as far as like building it out initially, we kind of have a little bit of like a mid-century modern vibe in there, like there was where the pharmacy was, there was this big metal cage that they like locked up the medications behind. And when we were painting and setting stuff up in there, because we really didn't do much of a build out, they already had a bar basically where the pharmacy was. We just put bar tops on there and we painted, and that was about all the work we did initially. And I was like, oh, well, you got to get rid of this big metal thing. And a friend of mine, Steven, who was helping me paint at the time, he was like, no, let me paint it gold and we'll see how it looks. And now that's like a huge part of our space, is this big gold kind of mid-century iron thing that's above our bar, that we couldn't have gone out and paid for or found anywhere, but it was already there, and we just spray painted it gold, and we get compliments on it all the time. So we definitely did it like on a budget, and just kind of worked with what we were. It's really bright in there. It's like a nice bright space. We get compliments on that all the time. But yeah, it was definitely just a budget kind of let's get things going. Like open is better than perfect.
Oh, yeah. And, just hearing your story of all of the brands coming together, coming out of college in 2020, doing all of this during that time, like bravo, first off. This is an incredible story, but also for those of you who aren't familiar with like the Florida kava scene, knowing that kava started there in 2002, but also you mentioned you're in Tampa. Tampa is right next to St. Pete. That whole area has so many kava bars. And I want to mention something that's very different about that area than, for example, Arizona kava bars. Arizona kava bars are like everybody hangs out at them. And when I first started working at my first kava bar in Arizona, honestly, we had people of all different generations. It wasn't like it never occurred to me that it would ever be some type of way. And then, visiting St. Pete and then also talking to people who have businesses in the area. I mean, you've got a very different, I mean, there's so many kava bars in that area that and you've got a huge Gen Z population who are really into it because college campuses are right there. So all of that being said, the fact that you guys are this like coffee shop and kava and kratom and CBD and all the things together, it's one of those things where it's like, there's so many different places you can go to help people, right? But to be this like oasis, to be able to say, hey, look, we have no alcohol here, but we have this and this and this and this and all these things that can help you. I think it's so cool because, as much as I respect and love kava bar culture, tradition, where we've come from, I think, like I said, that Newsline article just came through. Like cannabis just surpassed alcohol. We're at a point in time where people are genuinely questioning their wellness and their sobriety. And it's not just Gen Z. If you look at the trends of any other generation, I mean, everybody is decreasing in their alcohol consumption. Boomers, maybe not as fast as the rest of us, but we sure as hell are still serving boomers. So the fact that we're creating, like, you've got this space that you can help people with different definitions of sobriety, right? Some people feel totally fine in their sobriety with kava kratom and any form of any form of hemp or cannabis. Like this, that would be something that would make them feel good, whereas other people, they can't even have caffeine. They just want like some sort of they just want to learn and figure things out. So knowing that and knowing how different your guys' market is, but how you kind of fill this special gap that I feel like isn't as hit by some of the other kava bars. Have you, do you have a very large sober community, or do you actually serve a lot of people who don't even identify as sober, right? Just people who are just looking for their coffee and then they're going to go do whatever. Do you have a very large variety of clientele in the shop, or is it, the average kava bar community?
I think we definitely have a unique customer base. Like you said, I mean, so Tampa Bay has the most kava bars in the nation, I believe. I mean, I think St. Pete, like you could swing a cat and hit a kava bar. They're literally everywhere. And there is this kind of like competitive nature, obviously being in this industry, I've gotten to know a lot of kava bar owners and different business owners, and there is this very like competitive nature. And I know some kava bars in other areas of Florida where they'll be like, oh, this kava bar is opening and they're right near us. And I kind of look at it from the lens of like, the more kava drinkers there are, the more customers there are for all the bars, and a new bar is just going to bring more people that are interested in this kind of stuff. And I've never, I don't think you would talk to the owner of like a liquor bar who's mad that there's 3 other liquor bars on their street.
True.
Oh, it's at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of room, and that's kind of what we had like talked about with competition stuff. Is we aren't super concerned with the competition of all these different kava bars. I think we do serve this niche of people who are hopefully a little bit open-minded to alternative stuff, but maybe they aren't sober. We have a lot of people who there's a organic grocery store right next to us called Rolling Oats, and they have like one of the best beer and wine selections in the city. And we have people who they go over there and they get their beer and wine, and then they come over to us and they get some kava drinks and and THC drinks or functional drinks and just stock up for the week. And I think so we definitely serve that very diverse crowd. We have a lot of people who just live in the neighborhood and like coming in for iced tea or coming in for a kombucha. And I think we've definitely kind of put an emphasis on being okay with that. You know, when we train people, I just had a new employee asking me today, like, oh, is there anything like you really want to like, push towards people? And obviously, since we make like a THC product, that is on the forefront. So like people right next to our checkout counter, we have all of our lemonades kind of lined up, and people oftentimes like they're ordering their coffee and then they kind of glance over and they're like, oh, THC, like what is this? I didn't even know you could sell this. And it kind of opens up that conversation. But when somebody comes in, we usually say, hey, like, is there anything specific you're looking for? And if they're looking for coffee, I'm not there to be like, oh, well, have you heard of kava or have you heard of kratom? Because I don't know that that's necessarily something that interests them. So we definitely kind of keep it open to, if they're curious about stuff, we love talking to them about it. But if not, we're happy to have them as a customer that just comes in for iced tea.
Yeah, and we educate a lot of our customers on things, and that really, I think that's where I sometimes like sit back and reflect and think, wow, I'm so happy we're able to educate people about these alternative products, because that was really like the goal, was to have people feel comfortable in our space and be educated about products. I mean, I have people who come in and who want to know about all the THC beverages that we have, because we have more than just our lemonades. We also carry like seltzers and other brands as well. And it's always really just a great feeling to educate people on like, oh, this is this brand and this will make you feel this way, and this kratom brand will make you feel this way. And for people who don't know about it, because I think that's the thing is there's so much information there about so many different things, whether it's THC, CBD, kratom, kava, functional mushrooms. There's a lot of good information online, but there's also a lot of like information that's not necessarily accurate, or doesn't really reflect those alternatives as a whole. So I think being able to come in and ask questions and have people, just be genuinely interested. I'll have people come in to grab a coffee and they'll ask me, oh, what is kratom? I see kratom everywhere. What is that? And I'll educate them about it, and then they'll be like, okay, thanks. Like, and they won't even buy the product, but at least I was there to educate them on what this product is, what it will do, and like say, hey, yeah, we're here if you ever want to try it. So I think that's been the coolest part of Astrobrew as a whole, is just meeting people and educating them about this like vast industry that's still growing.
It's still definitely growing. This conversation is making me think back to a time when I was in college. So I went to UW-Madison, and I worked at a place called Sencha Tea Bar. And right next to Sencha Tea Bar, which was like a little bubble tea shop and this is before I knew what kava was. And this was the first place, Madison, Wisconsin. I mean, it's alcoholic city. I mean, it's just, if you're a Wisconsinite, like, you drink, like, it's just so deeply embedded. So working during college at this place it was the only sober place open until midnight. And there would be some coffee shops that were open, but the key differentiation was like, we sold 100 different varieties of tea, like loose leaf tea, but then you can also make your own bubble tea. So like you can make all the different things, right? So most of the time we didn't really have to educate a lot of people. It was very like, okay, here's your order and done. But there was still a little education. Like, people would want to talk about what teas, they would want recommendations based on that time of day. And we would do something very similar back then to what I've always done it, and a lot of people do at kava bars, with the education. But that coffee shop next door, I would always go there to get my espresso in the morning to get going. And you know, I was literally such a regular there. I'd go there in the beginning of the day and the end of the day. Beginning of the day before work, but end of day after my classes. And no matter what time I went, I don't recall a single time ever watching someone be educated on anything. Same with Starbucks. Every time I've ever been to Starbucks, I've never, besides like, getting information on the difference in pricing, or can you tell us what venti really means? Like, other than that, like, I've never heard a coffee shop environment be an educational place. Like, yes, it is, in the sense that if you have a meeting with someone, you can have an amazing conversation in a coffee house. Like, there's plenty of songs written about it, but that's not the business. That's what you do inside of it. The fact that you guys have this like coffee shop not with a big asterisk, with like all these other things, it creates a new space, which going back to the concept of competition again, this industry is too new for such thing. And when we look at things from this perspective of like, oh well, I want all of the customers to come hang out at my shop every single day, it's just not the right mindset to have. And I've been really excited about this conversation because you guys are on both sides of the industry, and by both I mean not only do you understand what it's like to serve directly to the people, but you know what it's like to create a CPG, create those lemonades from scratch. But even before that, you were sourcing the hemp itself. And this is where, I think competition is like the most healthy thing on planet Earth, because let's talk about kratom for a second. Like Kaba's getting better at regulation. You read those COAs, you can talk to the companies and learn more. I feel pretty good and confident about ordering Kava from many different places. However, kratom makes me feel like I'm talking to like drug lords who don't quite know, like the conversation's weird and I ask for a COA and then like things don't always happen. Like it's hard, it's so much harder to find a great distributor, and it's almost like I'm like shaking the industry, and I feel like I'm always asking people who listen to podcasts like this podcast, I'm like, is there anyone out there who like is interested in learning more about kratom in general? Like some of these fringe products people have a really hard time knowing how to get safe ones, and how it was, they send us something that looks like a COA. So how do we know like what a red flag is and what isn't? So all of that being said, I'm just so curious with your guys' very unique, insight on the industry when it comes to sourcing ingredients and suppliers for any aspect of your business. What's it like to both hit a slam dunk and be like, I feel so confident, I love this product, I stand by it, versus, oh my God, that's a red flag. We need to never talk to that company again.
Yeah. I mean, I think we were definitely like, obviously a lot of our success has been luck, timing. I mean, this industry like more or less didn't exist 5 to 10 years ago, and I'm talking about the THC beverage side of things, but obviously like Kava and Kratom have been around, and I think we got really lucky with some of the early relationships we made. As far as like suppliers go, I think it is pretty hard, and most people hold things very close to their chests. They don't like to share where they're getting their product, and that kind of ties into that competition. And I can say I am like that with some things as well. But I think the biggest thing for me was realizing that I can do my own lab testing on products. I got set up early on with like a hemp lab who now also does kava and kratom testing. And on the kratom side, so initially we were getting our tea from Mitra 9, which is like a local they're out of Fort Myers. They're a pretty big kratom seltzer brand now. And on the word of like consistency for kratom, I do think these like canned beverages are kind of pushing that forefront a little bit of like, they're prepared in very large batches, and there's starting to be so many canned kratom options. I don't know how many of them have made it out west to where you are, but I mean, here in Florida, we have just in Naples, where Trixie and I grew up, there's probably 3 canned kratom companies that have started there. Mitra 9 started in Fort Myers. White Rabbit out of California. There's these huge players in this canned kratom seltzer game that the consistency is there because of the volume that they're doing, and the way that it's being produced, where you're not just going into a kava bar and you're getting a scoop of kratom powder put into some hot water, and then you're hoping that it doesn't taste crazy gritty. And I think so. See, on the sourcing side, it's definitely hard to find people you can trust. Early on, I had a few people that kind of recommended someone to me, and recommended a supplier, and I kind of went off that trust that I had built with that relationship. And then eventually, as I started getting more stuff from that supplier, I would get it, like I would send it off to get lab tested. So we brew our kratom for Astrobrew. We use a crush leaf, which I've just found, you don't get that gritty taste. It just seems cleaner. And like on a very basic, like unscientific level, to me, I can see that it's the leaf of a plant. As soon as something becomes a powder, I feel like it's a lot easier to hide fillers and different things in it. Whereas like when I pick up a crush leaf kratom tea, it's leaves. Like I can see it. Maybe it's some other type of leaf, but at least I know it's leaves. Um, and we use that. We use some basic ingredients to potentiate it. We do cinnamon, turmeric, and black pepper. And there's kava bars that would like lose their mind if somebody tried to tell you what their recipe was. But we're pretty open about what we use, and it's a pretty straightforward brew. But I think it is really hard to find that consistency in kratom tea, and that's where I think regulation could do some good. There's not a lot of uh, transparency, and then the strength is so different too. I mean, so being in Tampa Bay, I could go and drive to 15 different kava bars and just get a double green, and get a 12 or 16 ounce tea from all these different places, and I could drink one each day and feel something completely different. And I think that's where consumers like they find somewhere they like, and then they don't really go somewhere else as often, or they go somewhere and they get it for the first time, and that maybe is their last time there.
This is such a good point you're bringing up, and I love this because in last week's episode, we talked a lot about how if you're feeling some sort of competition vibe and you're scared of giving away, the recipes because there is intellectual property that you are, it makes sense to have secrecy, right? But that's where we can always be like, yo, I can wholesale to you, my homie. We can come together and have some sort of like win-win scenario where coming together basically to have these kinds of conversations to me ensures the safety of the industry because as I consistently repeat myself on so many different platforms, remember that when we are all on the same page, that means that any sort of regulation that comes into play, we actually have a voice about. So what happened in Arizona, which was interesting, was kratom and kava completely unregulated. And kratom, I mean, gosh, there was some bad kratom in some places that was literally making my husband feel like he was having a worse, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the word. Withdrawal. He said the feeling of withdrawal was worse from this horrible bad kratom than it was from many other things in life that has given him a lot of pain. And at that point I was like, I'm about to quit this whole dang industry. Like this is scary. But then right after that, there was an opportunity within Arizona's laws where we could, be a part of the lawmaking process, and we were able to move kratom into the food category. So it's very regulated by the health department, which means they look very deeply into very specific things in this state, which helps safeguard it so that it is easier for us to like, I could be like, ring, ring, hello, hey, this smoke shop or this place is serving really bad kratom. It made me feel this way. Now, Arizona has the ability to do something about it, which is super cool. But let's say that that wasn't put into place and enough people got hurt by the product, it could just become straight up illegal. I really need to look this up to double check, but I'm pretty sure I saw like it was either Massachusetts or some other East Coast state is looking to make kratom a scheduled drug, which is
Well,
insane to me because that tells me there is no education. There's no one there going to the lawmakers to say, whoa, 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 hey, like, look, even though there is scientific research out there that does actually back up that it is not as bad as people make it out to be, if you go to these lawmakers and you're sitting in these sessions and you say, hey, as a business owner, I've served X amount of people over the past year, the 3 years, whatever. And I've had 0 people have like give me this feedback. I've had thousands of people who have had their lives changed in a positive way. So coming at it with a case study, we can do something about that together. So if we're all on the same page and we see these things coming up as business owners, we can legitimately change the course of history. Like we are at the time and place where, in history books you read about prohibition, and you read about when marijuana was taken completely out of the picture, and you read these historic moments where laws were made. Well, why did those pass? Well, back then there wasn't no internet. No one knew about things. So people, like certain small interest groups, can get away with pushing things through because there was no other way to get the word around and word around. Like, it was a different time, but this is 2024 now. Like, and this is a very special time. That article about cannabis only came out a couple weeks ago at this point. Well, by the time a month ago at this point. So it's to me, it just seems so foolish to, it's kind of like being on the Titanic and like hoarding your bread. Like, we're all going down. Like, go
Yeah.
ahead and finish your last bread, I guess, because if we're not all on the same page, that can be difficult. So all of that being said, like, that's one of my things that, like, one of my hills that I stand on, and I don't want to leave the industry until that's like it's done and it's taken care of. So if you guys could both, and I'd love to hear from both of you, if you could wave a magic wand, and, knowing that there are people listening to this podcast who are kind of looking for a way that they can help or dive deeper into the industry, what do you think we need more of? Or what do you think we need less of? Like, basically, if you could wave your magic wand to make some resource more available or some pain point go away, what would it be and why?
Oh, it's a great question. I think for me, I personally feel, and I don't know why this came to mind immediately, but that less is more. I think across the board, whether you're talking about like THC, kratom, or functional, like anything, I'd say, and especially to if an average person is looking into alternative beverages. I mean, we hear from people who would take like a THC seltzer or like drink kratom, and they have bad reactions to it. And the reason why is because they're drinking way too much of something that they don't have like any tolerance built up for or anything. So I think for me, if I could wave a magic wand, I would say less is more. So if you're super new to alternative beverages, just start with a little bit. I think there's this like, I think because binge drinking has been so glamorized in our culture, it's almost kind of seeped over into all other aspects of like, let's take a lot, let's feel this, let's go. But really, I think there's a lot of benefits from microdosing things. So whether it's THC, kratom, kava, I would say people need to stop pushing more onto consumers and just say start out with less, because that's kind of what we do with our THC lemonades. Our THC lemonades have 30 milligrams THC, 20 milligrams CBD, which for someone who doesn't, smoke weed or have a tolerance, that's a lot for them. And so we always just suggest, if someone is in the store or we're at an event where we're selling our lemonades or something like that, we always just say start small and you can always go up from there. So that would be mine. Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, I'd echo that as well. Just on like industry trends, I see companies making stronger and stronger things. I mean, on the kratom side, there's companies that are isolating the 7-hydroxy and like increasing how much of that mitronine is in it versus the like traditional mitronine. They're making these products intentionally stronger than they need to be, because it's a value add for customer, right? If you only need to take one instead of three, it's a great deal. But then the person who's never taken any comes and takes that one that's 3 times as strong, and it's the same thing with THC. I've gotten samples in the store of 1,000-milligram gummies. They have 850 milligrams of D8 and 100 milligrams of D9 and all this other stuff in them. And it's like, there's almost no one who needs 1,000 milligrams. And if they do, it's great that maybe that's available to them, or maybe they can eat 5 gummies. But generally, like the general consumer of THC, needs maybe 10 to 30 milligrams for like a very intense high. With kratom, like, if it's an extract, I'd say like 30 to 45 milligrams of mit is like a good point for someone who regularly uses kratom. And then you see these shots, that are for sale that are, 200 milligrams of mid. And then they're all of a sudden those companies are getting into lawsuits because somebody died from taking their product. And I think the less is more is just a really good way of putting like reasonable regulation that limits it. I mean, I always put it like there's two things that I say regularly to people. They'll come in and be like, oh, well, I tried that Delta 8 at a gas station. And I'll say, well, if I had only had sushi from a gas station, I would hate sushi. And at the same time, with some of the like beverage stuff, it's like if you could put an entire handle of vodka in a 2-ounce shot, even more people than currently would be dying from alcohol overdoses all the time from alcohol.
Mhm.
But that's what we're doing with some of these like kava and kratom shots and even some THC things. It's like they're so concentrated that realistically the end consumer shouldn't have access to them.
Nope.
And there is a need for this like concentrated thing for manufacturing and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, the average person shouldn't be able to get their hands on something that if they take a spoonful of it, they're going to have like very adverse reactions. So I think, and the industry in general is anti-regulation because typically regulation comes with overbearing regulation of, like then all of a sudden you can't sell any products or you can't sell effective products. And I see that, but in an ideal world, like this question is based around, I think some like common sense regulations would be better for everyone.
Mm. I hear that. And, as someone who lives in the Wild West, I feel you. I understand how, regulation can be taken in a really negative direction. And that's what happened. That's what we saw in Maricopa County, Arizona, which is where Phoenix is based. Kava is essentially, you can't open a kava bar anymore in the same way because you can only serve kava in a shell in the traditional form. You're not allowed to serve it in extract in a drink. You're not allowed to serve, you can only sell it as a supplement, essentially. It's a very, very weird place we're in. And that happened because no one else, like whoever got to the officials in the courtroom first, they set the precedent. And it's one of those things where, yeah, of course, we glamorize the Wild West, America, the land of the free. It's really turned into land of regulation in a lot of ways. But the reason is because otherwise we're gonna burn out, right? If we don't want to burn out and fade away, we want to be able to make this last lifetimes. If you want to build a legacy, if you're building a company with your family, for example, or you want to pass it on, this is the only way we can do that. And, it's a difficult struggle, the eternal struggle, I feel, but all together we can do it. So I thank you guys so much for bringing this incredible topic really to a light that hasn't been talked about on this podcast yet. So I really appreciate it. And my very final question for y'all is there anything else on the horizon coming up that y'all want to plug or tell us about?
Yeah, our lemonades, we have 4 flavors right now. And extra strength a flavor of lemonade that's just like an extra strength of THC for people who do have that higher tolerance. But we're coming out with a new flavor, which is going to be a sugar-free blueberry limeade. So that's really exciting. We mostly sell in Florida and a couple places outside of Florida as well, but our website is astrobleme.com and you can buy any of our products there. And that's really the big thing for us. What about you, Michael?
Yeah, no, I mean we've got a couple other unique products in the pipeline, and we're working on some like other botanical stuff, but nothing that's ready to announce yet. I don't think, other than that new sugar-free variation that we should have middle of July.
And yeah, if anyone is ever in Tampa, Florida, definitely come and check us out at Astrobrew.
Yes, this is so exciting. And everybody who is listening to this episode, if you want to learn more about anything we talked about, you're going to look at the description and you will find that there are a couple links, not only to their website, but you're also going to see the location if you want to check out Astrobrew, the shop itself. And I love that there is so much more to come, which probably means there will be a part 2 because I've really appreciated you both being here today. Thank you so much for all of your time and your incredible education.
Yeah, no, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much. We love chatting.
Yes. Anyone out there listening, if you have any questions, comments, anything that comes up at all, feel free to send me an email, hello@marinamars.com. And even if those questions aren't for me, even if those are for Trixie or for Michael, I'm so happy to send them over to get those questions answered. So go ahead and send those in. If there's anything else you want to learn, let me know. And as always, I'm here for you, but have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next episode.